Having discussed the 5 laws of existence in the video on the multidimensional structure of reality, I would like to turn your attention back to the law which postulates that whatever we put out, we get back. I mean, it's rather obvious that we cannot put out what we don't contain within us. And what we carry inside us is all the data that we've accumulated throughout our lifetime up to this point. I'm sure most of you heard the saying, as above, so below, or as within, so without, which basically means that our external experience is the direct result of our inner blueprint. Because as the quantum mechanics has established, our outer world is nothing but a projection of our inner state. As a mirror, the physical reality faithfully reflects the attitudes and definitions we have adopted as a result of early conditioning, which were then reinforced by the experiences that followed. These so-called verifiable proofs formed the basis of our core belief systems, which we have accepted as empirical truths, and which are causing us to continuously recreate the varying versions of those foundational programs in a perpetual loop. Our life is like a theatrical Broadway production where the cast of characters keeps changing, but the story stays basically the same. For example, you may have had 5 boyfriends, all of whom had different names, occupations, and hair color. But if you were to dig beneath the surface, then it becomes rather obvious that they were all essentially the same person in terms of their emotional makeup and behavioral patterns. The reason this happens is that if we observe dysfunctional relationship dynamics in our environment during our formative years, we're going to reenact those relationship problems because we have accepted them as the model of how people should relate to each other within a specific relational structure. This means that if our mother was physically abused or cheated on, we're now likely to seek out a similar relationship framework. Or if we had a parent who was overly critical of us or used us as a scapegoat to shoulder the blame for all the family problems, we're now going to have bosses, co-workers, and partners who will victimize and bully us much in the same way. Because every bit and piece of information recorded and stored in the brain is compiled into a massive database, which then through pattern recognition is used to create a baseline for all our future experiences by establishing the parameters of what's possible, likely, and acceptable. This will unconsciously cause us to gravitate toward people and situations that we recognize as familiar, thus making us attracted to individuals who are bad for us, simply because they feel like home. Many people report experiencing what's called love at first sight, where they form an instant connection with another individual that feels deeply intense and familiar. Some even ascribe mystical qualities to this phenomenon, thinking that it has to do with some shared past life history together. It is past life, all right, though not in the reincarnational sense that you might think. And my saying this is in no way a repudiation of the multiple lives concept, because we do experience many simultaneous incarnations. However, this intense and seemingly supernatural connection I'm talking about here is a very real phenomenon that is often misunderstood and misinterpreted. It's important to understand that our interactions with others extend far beyond the verbal communications or even the nonverbal cues like body language. Our energetic frequency, which encapsulates our core essence, constantly broadcasts electromagnetically coded information about who we are and our intentions without ever uttering a word. And that information is always received by those we come into contact with, regardless of whether or not they're consciously aware of it. In the majority of cases, what we erroneously attribute to past life recognition is nothing more than old trauma that's stored in our unconscious being triggered, thus causing us to register a familiar relational pattern in someone new and making us feel as though we had known that person all our life. And it's not because we have literally known them in a different incarnation, but that they're very much like someone else we had known in this lifetime. And what we are attracted to is the same emotional and relational blueprint that was at the very core of the individual who had traumatized us during our formative years. So the intense chemistry, the instant attachment, the addictive love punctuated punctuated by tumultuous ups and downs and feeling like the relationship or the person is impossible to leave are not signs of karmic kismet. No, these are symptoms of reactivated trauma bonds. Psychotherapist Virginia Sater believed that the strongest instinct in human beings, stronger even than the will to survive, is the need to keep things familiar and predictable, because predictability gives us a greater sense of control. And this baseline is what most people come to accept as normal, making it one of the pillars that provides us with the illusory safety born out of the shaky foundation of relative stability. It's the devil we know and have learned how to manage. Of course, everyone's normal is different because we've all had different experiences that shaped our worldview. For example, if we watched our parents encounter money problems and struggle to pay bills, we may now operate from the assumption that resources are scarce and that abundance can only be accessed by a small minority of individuals. Or we may come to believe that the deck is stacked against us, making it impossible to succeed. This attitude inevitably becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because our beliefs inform our actions, and actions beget results, thus perpetuating the program of lack and financial difficulty ad infinitum. A belief is a definition that we have accepted as true because of its so-called proofs, which are the events and experiences that support the veracity of the said belief. Even though we share a consensus reality where our individual beliefs overlap to a certain extent, no two people share the same experiences. Therefore, each person's model of reality varies to some degree from the model created by every other individual. But there are indeed some necessary general rules by which we all abide in order to successfully participate in society. For instance, we need to agree on which way is up and which way is down. We also need to know the difference between left and right, or day and night, just to name a few. But outside of these generally agreed upon conveniences, each of us lives in a separate reality that's more of a personalized idea construct than a fixed and independently objective environment. In fact, our shared reality is closer to the funhouse hall of mirrors, where each mirror is a belief system reflecting the idiosyncratic distortions within our individual blueprints. These model realities are built on our unique experiences and the distinctive ways in which we process them. It's important to remember, however, that contrary to the adage, seeing is believing, a belief always precedes the experience. Therefore, it would be more accurate to say that believing is what leads to seeing and not the other way around. Most people think that their beliefs were shaped by external experiences, thus appearing to provide empirical evidence in support of certain indisputable facts about the world and how it works. But the truth is that our belief systems and the resulting biases take hold long before we learn to distinguish shapes, colors, and sounds. By the time our brains have developed enough to be able to differentiate faces, we are far from being a blank slate, and not a single one of us starts interacting with the outside world from a sterile, undifferentiated state like a brand new factory-sealed computer. We come fully locked and loaded with all sorts of preconceptions without even realizing it.